We are live. So, not your hello, Linda, Bill. It's so great to see you. The gang's all here as we tuck in for another of our Sunday lives. And this time it's a Stories 250 Sunday live. And I call them Sundays when it's on Atlantic time, and I mix up them the next day when we tip over to welcome people from the other side of the international date line. Hello, hello. Welcome, Diane. It's lovely to see you. Lisa, lovely to see you back. So, on the topic of my story to tell, Stories 250 to me is all about breaking the mold of how we traditionally celebrate Independence Day here in the United States, and instead looking at it as an international event, because at the end of the day, it was a civil war and it resulted in the birth of a new nation. And yet, as we look at ancestors around the world, it was affecting all of us. Where were your people on July 4th, 1776? 50 years plus, 50 years minus. Yeah, it was a rough time. So, is it your story to tell? Welcome, Jane from New Zealand. And in fact, Jane, I think of as the inspiration for all of this, for the stories that she told of her Revolutionary War ancestors from New Zealand. We all have, these are our stories to tell.
Mm-hmm.
So, Lori Olson White, it's a delight to have you, to have you tell us the story in your family. And in fact, that's where some of the complexity lies. So go ahead, Lori.
It does. It does. I'm super excited to be here. A little nervous, as I always am. I'm a little nervous about talking, obviously. But yeah, this is a story. Well, first of all, if you listen to me before I read anything, my family is all German. And so we didn't come across until the earliest was 1869 till about 1887. So I don't have any Civil War history in my direct line. I don't have any, obviously, Revolutionary War in my history. So my husband, when I started looking at his people actually came across on the Mayflower. So I've got oodles. He's got oodles of great stories from every American moment, right? And so maybe like 10, 12 years ago, I started looking into his Hamby line. And I found a story. And that's the story I'm going to share with everybody today. And it is a revolutionary story. But it is not the revolutionary story that I grew up hearing. And maybe a lot of us didn't grow up hearing this story. We think about the Revolutionary War and, our mind goes to Paul Revere and George Washington and Alexander Hamilton and, and Betsy Ross, right? And a lot of it is mythology, straight up mythology, right? But that's what we know about the American Revolution, at least what I knew about the American Revolution. So 10 years ago, I start looking into this and I find these Hamby men. And the story starts in 1702, and that's when William Hamby is born, outside of Baltimore, and he eventually gets married. He and his wife end up having at least 5 children, 4 sons and 1 daughter. And sometime around 1760, after Indian Treaty is signed in South Carolina, these boys well, they're men now. They take the Great Road, and they end up in South Carolina, the province, the colony of South Carolina. And this is right after the Indian Wars, and they end up in the corner of South Carolina, the northern corner of South Carolina, that's bounded by Georgia on one side, North Carolina on the other, and the rest of it's all Indian land. And their story is defined by their geography, and the Revolutionary War in South Carolina is defined by that geography as well, because the people in the backcountry where the Hambys live were scared of Indian warfare, and the people on the coast were afraid of slave uprisings and being taken over by the British. They did not. They wanted their own autonomy, and so that's where the story starts. So when I first looked at the story, I I didn't go too deep. I was just so super excited that I'd found a revolutionary story that had a little bit of information, not a lot of information. Um, and then I kind of put it away. And then, like probably 6 months ago, I started looking at it again. And as so often happens when we look at family history stories and history at large, we start going into the weeds a little bit more. And this story turned out to be something that I did not know anything about. And it turns out not not many people know much about their story, at least. So I'll just jump in. Um, so South Carolina was um, was not the center of the Revolutionary War. There were never redcoats. 1775, there weren't redcoats in South Carolina. Instead, they had militias, volunteer militias, primarily in the backcountry where the Hambies lived, and they were loyal. They were loyalists. They were loyalists, and the only reason they were loyalist wasn't because they loved the crown so much, but because the anytime there was trouble, the military that came to help was British. And that was really the only reason that they were loyal. Um, it was like, what's best for my family, right? Which is,
It was the government. Let's be
yeah,
clear. The
but
other guys were the rebels.
no, not
So,
not not really though. See, that's what I thought, Barbara. So it turns out that South Carolina had like a shadow government from the colony, and so
well, yeah,
they had
Continental
like
Congress.
well they basically turned off the British government even before America, even before the Declaration of Independence, and so they didn't provide anything. They didn't have courts out there. They didn't have law enforcement. They didn't have anything. And even during the Revolutionary War, it was the British that came out to help them.
Mm.
So yeah, it's not what I expected, but that was why they were loyal. And so there's all sorts of information that's in books, but very little of it is in historical records.
Mm.
There's no muster rolls for these people because they were volunteers. There's no payrolls for them. And the only reason that we know that the Hambies, it's four of the Hambies, so John, Isaac, Jeremiah, Thomas, and Nathaniel Hamby. The only reason we know they were loyalists is because they got arrested. Uh, and they got arrested in November of 1775, fighting against the Patriots in in a little town up in that corner of South Carolina called 98, the 98 district. And they got arrested and they got brought to Charleston, were put in jail. And I should probably go back because we don't really know who these guys are. We don't know if they're brothers, if they're uncles and nephews, sons, grandsons. The records don't have any dates attached to them. We know they lived there, but the historical records they just say how many people lived in the house. They don't say who's in that house. And so there's a lot of ambiguity, let's say, about who these guys are. But I don't think that detracts from the story so much.
Hmm.
Other
Hmm.
people might disagree. But but anyway, so these guys end up in jail, and on Christmas Eve day of 1776, John Rutledge, who is the governor of South Carolina at this point, and eventually becomes a Supreme Court justice, he gives them a stay of execution until February 2nd of 1777, and so they end up not being hung. Which was good for the family because, that's how we got here, or my husband's side at least. So these guys get off, they go back to their home, and they kind of lay low for a very long time because by now the Patriots are kind of in charge of South Carolina, and their neighbors are a little suspicious, and there's a lot of infighting and intrigue and um, bad feelings, I
Yeah, and they're
guess.
all still in the
This,
96th
yep,
district.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. On the Enoree River is where they all
Uh-huh.
homesteaded.
I posted a little your map
Oh, oh,
so that they
terrific,
have some clue.
terrific. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I couldn't follow
Right.
along. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So anyway, so uh, what happens next is what really surprised me because in my head, the Revolutionary War was always like redcoats marching in lines, and then the Patriots marching in lines, and it was very organized and very
Right. Muskets,
clean,
lines, the
clean. Yeah,
drums, the
the
whole bit.
drums and fifes, the
Yeah.
pictures. Um, and this was not that. The Revolutionary War in South Carolina by this point is a civil war.
Yeah.
And it's a war of vengeance. It's a war of, um, you did this to me in the last 10 years, and I'm going to come back at you. And there were, executions. There were, people's houses were burned. Their crops were destroyed. I mean, it was terrible. It was a terrible, brutal civil war.
Hmm.
And, um, and, and, and I didn't know that. I,
Hmm.
I, I didn't know that it wasn't ideological at that point. Um, it was just pure distrust and hatred and um, revenge. Uh, right? And brutal, just brutal.
Yeah.
And
Bring
and the
out your
whole
battles.
idea, yeah, and the whole idea of freedom and representation and all those things that I grew up thinking. I mean, our revolution wasn't like the other revolutions, right? This was
The
like
theory.
we had ours was noble and ours was, you
Yeah.
know.
No, that's right. I mean, I
Um,
think that's a huge difference of looking at this in the context of your own family history, where you can get in and appreciate these individuals. And as you say, the fights with neighbors, neighbor against neighbor, we knew that, but it's neighbor against neighbor fighting 10-year-old disagreements.
right? Yeah, and and as I was researching the story, I just kept coming back to my naivety of thinking that this was noble. This was like we were all the patriots were the good guys and the loyalists were the bad guys. And that these were like high and mighty, yeah, brother
Brother
against brother,
against.
that these were
Mhm.
high and mighty ideals that we were fighting for. Um, and that everybody understood that. Uh,
Mhm.
and and that's like the biggest myth I think of the Revolutionary War
Now,
is that
when
we
you've just go ahead, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
The biggest myth of the Revolutionary War. I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
interrupted you.
I think the biggest myth of the Revolutionary War is that everybody was fighting for the same thing. And that the patriots, because that's such a loaded word, right? That there were patriots and there were rebels. Um and and in the context of the Hamby story and in the context of the Civil War that was going on in South Carolina that I didn't know anything about, um, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
It's very much uh, it's not about who's going to lead, and what kind of country we're going to have, as much as it's about personal vendettas,
Yeah. Well,
community
also
vendettas.
you're telling a story here about what is it, the backcountry of
Yeah,
South Carolina. This
yeah,
is not the giant plantations along the coast. This is not
no,
about Charleston. This is not
no,
about tobacco farms. And
no,
that's so different. And it's,
yeah,
what are the economics even in a fight like that? The economics in South Carolina, um, you know, were a fight that continued on to the Civil War,
for sure.
to put it simply. And out in the backcountry, where is that? What is that? What is the economics? What's driving all of that?
From what I mean, like I seriously bought 9 books From the oldest one was from 1867. The newest one is from 1989 or something like that. And I have been reading about this, that South Carolina in the Revolutionary War for months now, because there's no genealogical records. There's very few of them. You know, um, and so what I've come to, and if somebody else can help on this, bring it, because I am just anyway. Um, so it was fear. It was
Mhm.
fear is what drove this. Fear. The backcountry people were afraid that the Patriots weren't going to protect them from the Indians,
Mhm.
and that uh, and they hadn't in the past, and they weren't going to in the future. And what happens if they become our full-time leaders? What's going to
Right,
happen to
right.
us, right?
Yeah.
Everything that we
I
have,
think
what little we have, is going to go away, and our families are going to be, sacrificed at this altar to patriotism.
Honestly, I think that just to back up for a second here, from my perspective, that to me is some of the most powerful element of this Stories 250 idea of telling
Oh,
these stories from the perspective of what the record says about what our ancestors tell us. And,
mhm.
in this series, we've had a story about the Hessian soldiers, the
Yeah.
Hessian teenager that comes over, and stories from, yeah. As a matter of fact, I get to insert
Yeah.
here My Dear Acorns. Tad has jumped in to talk about the
Yes.
fear of native nations was
It was
huge and
huge.
complex. Insider
Huge.
tip Tad's going to be talking in December. He's got a special
So
plan ready for us. So check the calendar now and you get an insider tip to that.
excellent. Yeah.
Welcome. Speaking of nuance and complexity,
Yep.
Lisa McGuire has just
Mhm.
joined us. Where, our queen of microhistory, and the complexity of these kinds of stories as
Yeah.
we get into the backcountry. Now I'm all curious about the story of my John Bradshaw ancestor in what is now West Virginia,
Mhm.
and he as an Indian spy. What was that all about? I mean, the man came out of a wealthy family in England, comes marching across, and then voila, here comes a revolution, and he's an Indian spy. What's that?
Mhm.
I suspect he probably just
Where's
could
the
fake it with the Loyalists. Hmm?
But where's the motivation? Like, how did,
Right.
like,
That's
and
why
that's
I
what
asked about the
I,
economics.
yeah, I just kept, in like peeling back this story, and I know that there are people that have spent their entire lives y- learning about the history of South Carolina and the Revolutionary War, and I've spoken to them, and I've sent email, we've exchanged emails and down in the archives, and I mean, even some of them were like, there's so much we don't know, and I'm going to get to that part of the story about
Okay, go
why
ahead.
that is. Okay. So let's see, where did I leave off? Anyway, so there's a civil war going on, and it's brutal. It's brutal. And eventually, uh obviously, the Patriots win.
I've
And
heard that.
you know, and then they were like they were they win, which leaves these loyalists in the backcountry, and there were some everywhere, but mostly in the backcountry. Um, and what about them now? What about them? And so right after the Revolutionary War ends, um, South Carolina has like this reckoning of what do we do with these people? Because there's still this anger of this civil war that's been going on between these two groups of people, right? And all of the carnage and all of the, the economic disasters and all this terrible things that both sides have done to each other. And so South Carolina has like this super intense debate about how are we going to punish these awful people, because look at what they did to us. And I mean, they go everything from they're going to hang them for, they're going to hang them. They're going to take all their property. They're going to send, they're going to exile them. They're going to do, there's all this, hy- hyperbolic conversation about all the things we're going to do to these terrible, terrible, terrible people. And at some point, they, in my head, I can see this happening. At some point, they're like, that sounds like a great idea, but then what happens next. Because, like, if we hang all these people in that backcountry, or we get rid of them and send them away, who's going to protect us when when that Indian land is right there? Um, and so they kind of took a pause and said, "We need to reconcile this." And so that's what they did. And so initially, they had thousands of people on this list of people that they were going to, take their land and exile and all the other. And it turns out that in the end, it was like 200 or 300 people were actually ever punished and had their land confiscated or were exiled.
Mm.
Um, and
They
not, I
needed
mean,
them.
right?
Yeah.
There were a lot of them that, especially the loyalists that had been in Charleston, they ended up, going to Nova Scotia or
Or
to
go up
back
to,
to
yeah.
Great Britain or somewhere, wherever. But in the backcountry, they basically said, I mean, we have to live together now,
Yeah.
uh, which was incredible.
Yeah.
And um, they just decided that they were going to go neighbor to neighbor and make amends. And that's how that went.
So now we have family.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And that's what happened. That's what
Yeah.
happened to the Hamby family.
It's so interesting. Well, I guess it's not surprising that history is following the money, right? We have so much of the story that's told is up in the Northeast, or it's down along the coasts, the very, very, and heck, that was supporting a huge part of the
Oh,
country in the first
for
place.
sure. Yeah.
And let's delicately put it in terms of tobacco and everything else that was coming out
It
of the
was
South.
rice and indigo was coming out of
Oh,
South Carolina.
indigo, of course, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And the economic model with enslavement that
Yep.
supported it,
Yeah.
which then got suddenly complicated from Britain's perspective because
Right.
as a means to try to win this 8-year war that was just kept continuing.
Yeah.
I was so surprised in the work that I was doing on my coffin family that all of a sudden, Nathaniel Greene goes down to South Carolina
Yeah.
and completely changes the battle strategy to a guerrilla war
Absolutely.
and
Yep.
a strange decision on Cornwallis's part to hightail it back up
Back
where
up to
he
New
gets
York.
trapped, which is the
Right.
end of the war. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
so it,
Yeah.
it really sort of shows the Southern, how it's no wonder we had a civil war.
Yeah. There's
You leave
that.
old wounds open.
Yeah. Right. Or you just pretend they never happened.
Yeah.
And that and I mean, I think one of the authors I was reading said she called it like a um I've got it in Barbara knows I've got all these notes.
It's okay.
Amnesia. Yeah. She called it amnesia. And that they just said this didn't happen. So how what happened then, of course, was um, the people that were loyalists, like the Hambys, they didn't tell their kids and their grandkids about their what they did during the Revolutionary War. They didn't write. They didn't write. I mean, there's a few of them. There's a guy named Chesney, I think his name is, and he wrote about it. But even that, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, this is kind of vanilla, um, you know. Um, but so they didn't share their true histories, their
Yeah.
personal stories, and their the hardships that they went through. They just didn't. And so within a generation or two, the idea that there were loyalists uh, just kind of disappeared. And instead, when in obituaries they would say, Revolutionary era guy, or
So
was in South Carolina during the Revolution.
when the centennial happened in 1876, I understand that, as the story is told, that this created a lot of, fervor and excitement about the patriots and whatnot,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
foundation for things like the sons of the American Revolution and ultimately
Right.
the daughters of the
Yeah.
American Revolution, with
Mhm.
all of also, as you showed me, that whole momentum of the study of genealogy and
Yeah.
lineage and
Yeah.
the Mayflower Society and whatnot.
Yeah.
How did that whole thing sort out with people who
Don't
had
know.
complex connections?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they didn't they're not listed. You know, like I said, at least for there at least for the there's a there are documents. There's like a list of South members of the muster list for the South Carolina Royalists, which
Mm,
which they were from 1779 until 1782, right around there,
mhm,
right? Um,
mhm. Oh, that's
so
right. Thank you, Tad.
yeah, there's those lists. And
Mhm.
then there's just these random court records that appear in the South Carolina records of men that were charged with sedition.
Mhm,
Uh, and then there's a confiscation list.
mhm.
But there's just, considering there were thousands of men that were involved in this, there aren't a lot of names.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, interesting.
and
Tad just chimes in with a reference, of course, to the tour
yeah, in
of
26, yeah.
Lafayette in 1824
Hmm.
25, and again, that was in anticipation of the 50th
Yeah.
anniversary. So,
Mhm.
in an interesting way, it puts all of this into context
Sure.
of where we're headed now,
Which
and
family history always does, right? It
exactly.
does.
It does. And it also, we think about the trauma in our own families, whether that's a trauma of divorce, which was not spoken of in the 50s,
Mm.
to, the horrific things people do to each other,
Yeah.
and the trauma that that creates, and how we as human beings handle it both intellectually and then into documentation and scholars. And full respect to the scholars online. I see you. I
Yeah.
see you.
Yeah,
But
I do too.
also who will be watching this recording. I personally think that there is a really important role for families to play in telling the stories, both that they were told,
Yeah.
stories that they discover, and stories as they retell them, um, for better or worse.
And
Dear
stories that
Myrtle
don't get
just
told,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Dear Myrtle just posted a link, America 250 link from American Ancestors, which is the Northeast New England Genealogy
Mhm.
Society, about which is full of great roots. And I will keep this
Yeah.
link in.
Yep.
I'll include that link in the notes for those of you
Mhm.
watching this later. Also, just for a little plug here, because I am a Ken Burns fangirl, tonight is the release of the American, I believe it's called Revolutionary War, or was it the American War of Independence, the British name for
Yeah,
the thing, the
I think
British
it's the
brand.
revolution. I think it's revolution. I know.
It's like the
Yeah.
British spelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
For our shared war. But that premieres tonight
Mhm.
at 8 p.m. Eastern, which we can all
PBS.
watch on our PBS app, along with watch parties I've circulated about. But I think that kind of thing, which is, I mean, whichever side of any spectrum you're on, you have to appreciate the extraordinary technique and production of those kinds of documentaries to give us ways to explore. It's like looking back at something like Roots and seeing how the American TV show Roots in 1977 transformed how people looked at their own history and started paying attention to the details. And I rather expect that with this extraordinary story in your husband's family, it's going to be the kind of thing that will continue to be
Oh,
researched and explored.
for sure. For sure. I mean, I've got emails that have not been responded to yet that that are going to add to this story. But I think to your point, Barbara, I think you know um, shows like this, the Ken Burns one, and the other things he's done, and all the historical things, whether they're historical, straight up historical fiction, whatever they are. Um, I think I think they add to the mythology that we all have. Um, but I think they also can have us looking and say, where were my people? Where were my people in there? Like even if we just have like a high level understanding of our own family history, because I know it's crazy. Not everybody knows. It's crazy, but it's true. But even if we just have those high level ideas, we can say, I feel like I heard that, my family was in Tennessee. Well, then when you're watching that, then all of a sudden you're like, so that was going on. I wonder what was going on with my people.
Exactly.
Um, and
Exactly.
then the Revolutionary War becomes not just a story of two sides, but it becomes a story of how people lived through it. And I think for me, this story really, that's what it's come down to. It's like these people had horrific decisions to make. They were deciding, they didn't know how this war was going to go.
Hmm.
You don't know.
Hmm.
Uh, and they were having to sit down at the kitchen table with each other, this family, and say, which direction are we going to go? What's more important to us? Is it more important that we can trust the people that if we're if we're under attack, who's going to come help us?
Right. Right.
And if we choose the wrong side, there's some pretty big consequences, you
You're
know?
right. Right.
And then once they started going down that path, they had to daily choose that they
Right.
were going to stay on that path.
Right.
And so I think the bigger stories that where our families fit in, I think are so great for um, some kind of thinking about our own uh, the choices that we make that we don't really spend a lot of time on
Right.
sometimes. Um,
Jane's chimed in that it also split families.
oh, for
And,
sure, for
and
sure.
as we here in the United States lead into our Thanksgiving week, it is a perhaps an appropriate way to wrap this up. Coming into Thanksgiving week, where people will traditionally sit around a table with family members that they may or may not agree on, and you narrow down the range of topics that you can cover about the garden or something. Try to stay out of
In
fights.
Minnesota, we just talk about the weather.
Well, exactly, because there's not much going on in the garden about that time when the snow's on the ground. But it's and yet sometimes having the hard conversations is exactly what
Yeah,
you need to do,
yeah.
because that's where, whether it's through amnesia or reconciliation, finding ways to find the common ground. Politics is pretty messy. And in this
Always has
time,
been, but it
oh,
always has been.
always has been.
I mean, we can say, "Oh, it's bad now," but I mean, just look at the records. Look, I mean, from day one, and not just
Yeah,
here, but everywhere. It's
right.
all that's
Yeah,
we've always been
yeah.
we've always been on tetherhooks.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I was so proud of myself for discovering that my, family that was out there tending to the injured, when I discovered the other half of it was actually out bombing people, um, on the other side of the war, and they were cousins.
yeah,
They were all
yeah,
still cousins, but they were like in memory cousins,
yeah, yeah,
first
yeah.
cousins. And that's the kind of thing that really makes you think about your first cousins right now. Where are your first cousins? What are you doing? Go
Yeah,
have a conversation over
but
Thanksgiving.
but I think I think that's the best part of looking at family history, right? Is that we can look at it and we can say they came through this. They came through they came through A, B, C, D, and so, people are going to look
I
at us
can't
100 years and they're going to say, how did they do it? How did they come through that crazy COVID thing? And we can stand on record and say, this is how we did it. That's why it's so important we tell our stories, not just the stories of our ancestors, but that we tell our own stories because we are going to be somebody's ancestors.
We hope so. That's the goal.
Some
I
point,
think
at
that's
some
that's
point.
a wonderful place to close this, because in fact, As I said, coming into holidays, and appreciating it and realizing what so many of us do here in paying attention to our family stories, our family history, and inspiring others, especially family members, to do the same. I want to thank you so much for your months and months of preparation for this, the courage to step up and join me.
I
Um,
want to thank you. I mean, this was it's like a big research project, so of course I loved it. But I mean, like I would yell at Jerry and say, "You can't believe what I just found." So
that's what it's all about.
it is what it's all about, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah. So thank
There we
you.
go.
It's
There we
it was a
go. All the love. Thank for all of you joining us today. It's a great fun to watch you all join in and enjoy the conversation. And I look forward to your comments and thoughts as we drive this in. Welcome, Lisa. You are part of the family now. As we move forwards with so many of things, join on and you'll find a lot of. Oh, wait. Go ahead.
at some
One more
point
thing.
at some point I am going to share this story in a written form. Not yet.
Just for the world out there, I have always insisted that the posts be out there before we do our Substack
I
live
know.
session. But Lori earned herself a special case because I know she will deliver.
Plus I
Um,
sent you the draft. So
and you did, and it's a good one. It's a good one. All 4,000 words of it.
what can I say? What can I say? It's a big story.
She's going to serialize it, no doubt. You only
Sure.
get one entry in the timeline.
That's right.
Jane
Yeah.
brought us a 9-part series. You
I
still only
know.
get
See,
one line.
see, see, I don't
So
feel so bad. Jane, mine is not going to go that far. I mean, like right now it's like 4 or 5, 4 or 5. If I get those emails back, it might go to 6.
oh, there we go. There we go. So we've fueled another one. So
Yeah.
for all of you who are new, our Stories 250 series, you'll find it all at projectkin.org/stories 250, which now, by the way, includes the stories themselves. Plus, I have a timeline where you can see how all the stories shift on the important dates in the period, which is fun. And we have a map that shows all the references for where these stories took place. You and I can talk about whether this one qualifies for the timeline in the map yet. I think we can link to the recording, but we'll see.
We can wait on this
And
too.
we have upcoming events, and I've planned to keep this series going through at least July 4th, 2026. And I am filling up the calendar. I have through February, or is it March? Maybe it's March so far. And happy to always eager to continue to fill that out. I'm not even sure where I'm going to be on July 4th, 2026. I think we're going to have a special event
Mm.
to wrap this up and make a thing of it. But you know what? I think we're also going to be busy. I love the global aspect of this from Britain, and let's say, face it, it takes two to tango, all the way to Australia, New Zealand, and probably Hong Kong and elsewhere to make the whole story hold together. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll talk soon. Bye now.
Thanks. Bye bye.